Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm happy to present SB 476. I would first like to thank the committee staff for all their very generous time and hard work on this bill, and especially you, Mr. Chair, for spending a generous amount of time with me. The California State Board of Pharmacy currently has the authority to deny or revoke any pharmacy license when there are grounds for disciplinary action. As you may know, when a pharmacist accepts a title of pharmacist in charge, he or she is signing up to put their license on the line for the pharmacy they work in. SB 476 is a simple measure to ensure that people responsible for making mistakes are truly held accountable for their actions. This bill simply specifies that a person who signs up to be pharmacist in charge should not be punished for actions taken in the pharmacy that they had no authority over. Currently, pharmacists in charge are found in violation because of something that the pharmacy license holder didn't do, or instructed them to do. This bill will fix this problem by making it clear that the pharmacist in charge took all actions within their authority to remedy a possible violation. Perhaps most importantly, SB 476 places the responsibility for violations on a pharmacy license holder for appropriating the authority of a pharmacist in charge and their ability to carry out their duties by allowing the Board of Pharmacy to fine the license holder up to $50,000. In today's world, young pharmacists are too often offered the title of pharmacist in charge in exchange for a few extra dollars an hour without realizing that their responsibility includes putting their license and hard-earned money on the line. SB 476 and the amendments before the committee will make it clear that the license holder is ultimately responsible for the actions taken at the pharmacy. This bill protects pharmacists from being held responsible for actions they had no control over. It's common sense, it's fair, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote. I did have two witnesses that were going to be here today. Unfortunately, one had to fly to Southern California to be with an ill parent, and the other one was sick today. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Any other witnesses in support?
Jazzy Graywell with UFCW Western States Council in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Are there witnesses in opposition? All right, we're going to bring the matter back to the committee for discussion. Senator, first let me thank you for the focus on this issue of pharmacists in charge. I didn't really know much about it until a few weeks ago, and your bill certainly has drawn my attention, and I'm sure my colleagues, to the issue. And I appreciate you working to find a pathway to deal with this issue. I know initially the bill removed pharmacists in charge of activity that they weren't aware of, and I think you heard my concerns about that I thought it had the potential to undermine consumer protection, and that we had to make sure that the work that was done was appropriate. And I think your bill then veered in the direction that we see it today, which is to focus in a different direction on the ownership of the facility, less than on the pharmacists in charge. And so I appreciate the progress that we've made, and certainly the education that's occurred with the bill as you are currently proposing it. I think one of the questions that still remains with me is to understand how significant of a problem this is out there in our world. And is there anything you want to comment upon in terms of, is there any study or data that you can reference there in terms of this potential problem or this existing problem?
Thank you, Senator. You know, as the first pharmacist in the legislature in 30 years, many in the pharmacy profession they see me as their ambassador here in the legislature. So I've had numerous correspondences with those that have been inappropriately cited as pharmacists in charge and those that are not willing to take the job because they don't want to put themselves in harm's way. And what I'm going to do, Senator, Mr. Chair, is I'm going to refer a lot of those correspondences that I'm getting to members of the committee so you can see that this is not an issue that I've dreamed up. It's really an issue of getting competent people that have experience in working, especially in retail pharmacy, to be in charge of that pharmacy and to control the many nuances that can happen in a pharmacy. Pharmacy law is very complicated, both at the state level and the federal level. And all that responsibility falls on the pharmacists in charge, whether or not they're even at the pharmacy. If it's a 24-hour pharmacy and a violation occurs at 2 o'clock in the morning, that pharmacist in charge gets cited. If he condoned that activity and it's shown that he gave direction to disobey the law, he deserves to be cited as the pharmacist in charge. But I think the best thing to do is to hear from those pharmacists that refrain from being pharmacists in charge than those that have been inappropriately cited.
I appreciate that, and I think that's one of the nice things about being in a Senate and a legislature where we all have different experiences in life that we bring to our lawmaking process, because that's really what makes good laws, right, and makes good judgments, is that we see and feel that experience. Certainly that also comes from the witnesses that come and testify before us. So I think for me, at least, where I'd be a little bit more comfortable in moving this bill is that if we ask the Board of Pharmacy to look at this issue and to see if they can take a careful look at the extent in which this is a problem and inform us to what they find, that might, for me at least, provide a better foundation in which to talk about the issues of raising fine levels, as this bill proposes, or other activities that we might consider doing to make sure that our rules are enforced, that the person in charge really is in charge and is held accountable for that in an appropriate way. And so I wondered if you would be open to that idea of directing the Board of Pharmacy to examine this issue in more detail. We could come up with language as to the specific things that they would do, but ask them to report back in a year or two with that kind of information, at least for me, and I'll hear from my committee members as well. But that would make me a little bit more comfortable, rather than just a 10x fine change without a real careful examination of the problem, as to let's take it a half step forward maybe, but at least a step forward, as you've worked to educate us and others as to why this may be a problem out there. Would you consider that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to work with you, and if that's a desire of the chair, I'd be happy to accommodate you. You may ask, why the tenfold increase in the fine? The problem is that these large chains, it's very easy for them when they get a violation, just write a check for $5,000 and move on. But I can tell you, if it's $50,000, they're going to take a second look and say, okay, we have a problem and we need to fix that problem. I think they'll be a lot more serious. So if that's the will of the chair, I'm happy to accommodate you, sir, and the committee in any way to move the bill forward.
Okay, well, let me see if my colleague, if there's any agreement or disagreement with that direction. Senator Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that's a good approach. And it might, the solution and the sanction may not just be financial. There may be some other restrictions that could be placed on their ability to do business in certain cases. So I think that's a good approach to have the Board of Pharmacy take a closer look. And it may be in 1 year, give them a little time. I don't know if 2 is necessary, but I'd like to see something sooner than later that may be helpful.
Okay,
Thank you.
Senator Leyva, your thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with your thoughts, but I also like to say I agree with my colleague, Senator Stone, that many of these large corporations just see it as a cost of doing business. And so if it's $5,000, they'll do whatever they need to do, write the check, and continue to be repeat violators. So sometimes we do have to have a bigger stick. So I agree with that, but I also agree with proceeding to the Pharmacy Board. That's fine with me.
All right. Senator Archuleta.
Yeah, my concern, thank you for bringing this forward. My concern is having it too long. I think 2 years might be a little bit too long. If this is actually happening every single day and we aren't aware of it, then you got to bring it back with facts and data, so then we can act quickly, because I think 2 years would be too long, Mr. Chair. So as my colleague mentioned, sooner the better.
Very good. Well, if this bill is enacted this year, it wouldn't go into effect until 20, so maybe allowing them to report back in 21 a year later might be the appropriate date. I guess that's what I would suggest. So Senator Galgiani.
What about the small mom and pop pharmacies? Are they treated the same under this bill? Because my concern is, if you have a small pharmacy-owned pharmacist who makes a mistake, that could put that pharmacist out of business entirely.
Well, if they make a mistake, it doesn't mean they're going to get fined $50,000. It's for not following pharmacy laws. As an example, there's a certain ratio of pharmacy techs that you can have under California law. So if you're a sole proprietor like I am in a compounding pharmacy, and I decide I'm going to have 6 techs working because I need to get the volume and I don't want to hire another pharmacist, they should be appropriately charged. However, it's up to $50,000. I don't think you're going to see the state board levy that kind of a fee unless it's really something that's very, very serious.
So it's likely that would not happen to a sole proprietor.
I would doubt it, but I also, in response to Senator Hill, we're not just talking about fines. We're talking about suspensions or revocations of licenses. That's where you really have the chain store's attention. When you have one of their stores, they don't want the press to get a hold of the fact that their one store in Riverside County was shut down because their pharmacists were not following the laws. So it's not just fines, it's also the license is the key in making sure that they understand that their license is in jeopardy if they're not instructing their pharmacists in charge to carry out the laws of the state of California. If they basically tell them to skirt the law or you're going to be fired and they do that, then the licensee should be held accountable and the PIC should be held responsible as well.
Okay, thank you.
For Senator Galgiani and others. So the author's agreeing to amend his bill to eliminate the provisions relative to fines and obligations and simply ask as a study be done to the Board of Pharmacy on this issue and report back in 2021. That's what if the committee agrees, that's what we're going to move forward with today. Okay. Senator Stone, would you like to close on that note?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think we've discussed it. I wanted to make you aware that we have a lot of pharmacists that would like to be pharmacists in charge. I think we should have the most experienced pharmacists in charge, especially with new graduates that are coming online. I learned my best care of patients through young pharmacists in charge that I work with. One, Dr. Jim D., who's my preceptor in Hollywood, who taught me a lot more than I ever learned in pharmacy school about patient safety and caring for patients. And in his memory, I'd like to ask for your aye vote.
Very, very nice. So for committee members, I'm going to ask for a motion that would be do pass with the author's proposed amendment to replace the content of the bill with a requirement to the Board of Pharmacy to do a study reporting back to us January 1st, 2021 on the issue of the prevalence and interference of corporate management on pharmacists in charge and the best way to handle it. And that the author will work with our staff on that exact language prior to its presentation to appropriations. Okay? Senator Leyva moves that item. With that, the secretary would call the roll.
Motion is due pass as amended to Senate Appropriations Committee. Glazer?
Aye.
Glazer, aye. Chang? Archuleta?
Aye.
Archuleta, aye. Dodd? Galgiani? Aye. Galgiani, aye. Hill?
Aye.
Hill, aye. Leyva?
Aye.
Leyva, aye. Pan? Wilk?
Aye.
Wilk, aye.
Senator, that bill has enough votes to get out. We'll hold the roll open for
Again,
absent
Mr.
members.
Chair,
Thank you.
members,